Oh.
Would the Senate please come to order? We'll observe a moment of silence in lieu of a devotional. Thank you. Are there any announcements? Seeing none. We have received H 949 back from the House, and they've refused to concur in the Senate proposal of amendment and have appointed a committee of conference. On behalf of the Committee on Committees, the following senators are appointed to the Committee of Conference on the part of the Senate. Senator Cummings, Senator Chittenden, and Senator Beck. We have received H 933 back from the House, and they have refused to concur in the Senate proposal of amendment and have appointed a committee of conference. On behalf of the Committee on Committees, the following senators are appointed to the Committee of Conference on part of the Senate. On the miscellaneous tax bill, Senator Cummings, Senator Hardy, Senator Matos. H 841 being on the calendar for notice and affecting the revenues of the state under Rule 31 will be referred to the Committee on Finance. H 567 being on the calendar for notice and carrying appropriation under Rule 31 is referred to the Committee on Appropriations. H 931 being on the calendar for notice and carrying an appropriation under Rule 31 is referred to the Committee on Appropriations. And H 937 being on the calendar for notice and carrying an appropriation under Rule 31 is referred to the Committee on Appropriations. Orders of the day. Third readings. We have S 329 for third reading. Are there any amendments to be offered prior to third reading? Seeing none, listen to the third reading of the bill.
S 329, an act relating to criminal procedures involving firearms.
Question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question?
Roll call.
Roll call's been requested, and when the vote is taken, it shall be by roll. Are you ready for the question? Senator from Windsor.
Can I request a quorum call so senators who are
The
aware of...
bell goes on every time we
May I
ask for a
request
roll call.
brief recess then?
We've had two votes.
We will take
May I
a
request
very
a
brief recess.
Yeah.
Come to order.
Hi. Thank you,
Senator from
President,
Windsor.
for recess.
Are you ready for the question? If so, the secretary shall call the roll.
Senator Baru.
Yes?
Senator Beck.
No?
Senator Benson.
No?
Senator Bungard.
Yes.
Senator Brennan.
No.
Senator Brock.
No.
Senator Chittenden.
Yes.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Collmore.
No.
Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Senator Dooley.
Yes.
Senator Hardy.
Yes.
Senator Harrison.
Yes.
Senator Hashim.
Yes.
Senator Heffernan.
Nay.
Senator Engel.
No.
Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Senator Major,
Yes.
Senator Matos,
No.
Senator Morley,
No.
Senator Norris,
No.
Senator Kirschner,
Yes.
Senator Plunkett,
Yes.
Senator Ron Hinsdale,
Yes.
Senator Mahowski,
Yes.
Senator Watson,
Yes.
Senator Weeks,
No.
Senator Westman,
No.
Senator White,
Yes.
Senator Williams,
Those voting yes, 17. Those voting no, 13. And the Senate has passed S 324. Senator from Washington.
Just point of clarification, do you mean 329?
329, yes, I am sorry. That's someone's sloppy writing and my poor eyesight combined. We have passed S 329. We now have H 816 for third reading. Are there any amendments prior to third reading? Senator from Wyndham.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have a small amendment that is being handed out now. This amendment is being proposed by both myself and the Chair of Health and Welfare. Provides some clarifying language in one section and amends the private right of action in the second section. So the clarifying language amends subsection B on page 2262 of today's yes, 2262 of yesterday's calendar. It closely mirrors language that has been passed in similar statutes in Maine regarding this same topic and provides a bit more clarity on the issue of providing, advertising, or otherwise offering mental health services through AI. The second, more substantive change is an amendment to the private right of action. So the bill in its current form allows for individuals who are not licensed mental health professionals to be fined by the Attorney General and to be sued civilly if they engage in the conduct described on page 2262 of yesterday's calendar. So AI usage is a rapidly expanding field and will likely be legislating quite a bit in this area into the future. It's also becoming pervasive in all of our devices. And for example, several weeks ago, I was using my phone to look something up, and without any sort of granting of permission, my Google app was just providing AI answers, and I had to mess with my phone for a while to turn that feature off, a feature that I did not ask for. And shifting more to the context of this bill, I had initially some concern about the private right of action and how it was crafted, and a concern that it could be overly broad in an unintentional way. And so, as a hypothetical, if a parent is seeing some concerning behavior from their child, and the parent decides to use an AI to see what those symptoms mean, and to get some guidance as to how to treat those symptoms and any potential mental health issues, that parent could be fined $10,000 and sued civilly. And in a different hypothetical in which the parent acted in a malicious or intentionally harmful way and it resulted in an injury, there is still the exposure to liability there. There are still different pathways that could be used to sue. So generally speaking, I would agree that a non-licensed person shouldn't use AI to provide any sort of mental health guidance to another individual, but in the context of a private right of action, that degree of exposure to liability should be narrowly directed to the professionals and the corporations who are expected to have a duty of care. The purpose of the amendment is to move that private right of action closer to the underlying concept that if a defendant has a duty of care, they violate that duty, and it results in an injury, they can be sued. So that is the amendment, and I ask for the Senate's support.
Are you ready for the question, Senator from Addison?
Thank you. May I inquire of the reporter of the amendment?
The reporter's interrogated.
In this context, Mr. President, does entity mean or a healthcare provider or a non-licensed healthcare provider? I mean, what does entity mean in this context? Because if
I think that well, this is more of a speculative answer, but typically when we're talking about a person, it's going to specifically say a person in the statute. An entity could refer to the AI, it could refer to the corporation, or if it's not necessarily a corporation and it's a different organization that is using AI to directly provide mental health services without going through a mental health provider, I believe that's what it may be referring to. But if it were to be referring to a person, it would say a person typically.
Okay, well, a person has a broader context in the law than actual human beings. So like a corporation actually, in some contexts, can be a person. But this is specifically saying a corporation or an entity. It's not, I mean, can one sue an AI? I mean, I feel like that is law we haven't gotten into yet. And also, if an individual, a human being, is directing AI to provide these services to a patient, is that covered by this corporation or entity?
I think it would depend. If the person is working for whatever corporation or entity is operating that AI, then those entities could be liable under this or could be sued under the private right of action.
Okay, I'm just concerned, Mr. President, I understand the intent of narrowing this so it doesn't capture individuals such as parents and others who are not, shouldn't be liable for simply asking a question of AI, but I'm concerned that this is narrowing it so much that it will end up not being anyone. Do you mind, Mr. President, could we just take a small recess so I could consult with counsel?
We will take a brief recess.
Thank you.
Will the Senate please come to order?
Thank you, Mr. President. I conferred with council and the two senators who offered the amendment to make sure I understood their intent. And while, I'm concerned that it narrows it, I was reassured that it narrows it in an appropriate way. And I thank the senator and thank you, Mr. President.
Are you ready for the question? The question is, shall the Senate proposal of amendment be amended as offered by the senator from Wyndham? Are you ready for the question? So all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we have amended the bill as offered by Senator from Wyndham. Are there any further amendments prior to third reading? Seeing none, listen to the third reading.
H 816, an act relating to regulating the use of artificial intelligence in the provision of mental health services.
The question is, shall the bill pass in concurrence? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we have passed H 816 in concurrence. We now have H 921 for third reading. Are there any amendments prior to third reading? Seeing none, listen to the third reading of the bill.
H 921, an act relating to alcoholic beverages.
Question is, shall the bill pass in concurrence with proposal of amendment? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we have passed H 921 in concurrence with proposal of amendment. We now have H 930. Question is, shall the bill pass in concurrence with proposal of amendment? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to oppose this amendment to H 930. Mr. Wright, are we going to do the amendment first?
Senator, there is no amendment.
All right, my apologies to the...
We are voting on shall the bill pass.
There is an amendment.
The amendment first.
Oh, there is actually an amendment. Okay, well, we should wait until the amendment is proposed to not support it. Senator, when I asked, are there any amendments, I didn't see you stand up. I'm assuming Senator from Chittenden Central.
I apologize for that. Yes, I do have an amendment. Thank you, Mr. President. There are, and by the way, this is a really good bill, H 930, and I'm really happy that there is going to be a report worked on and submitted around the home study program, which is homeschooling in the state of Vermont. That's excellent. This amendment is something that would just put in place sort of like almost like a little check back in between now and when that report is complete. There are approximately 5,000 kids in homeschooling situations in the state, home study programs. The vast majority of them are wonderful and excellent, but this came to me from some educators who have concern about a small number of children. If I could read some testimony from an email that I received. So recently when a group of superintendents got together and they were asked if they were concerned at all about absenteeism with regard to students and then students moving out of school because of their absenteeism to homeschooling, all of the superintendents in the room raised their hands. And they all have one or two students. So we're not talking about vast numbers of kids, but if there are 52 superintendents and they each have one or two students, we're looking at between 50 and 100 plus kids. So it is important that we think about this and that we address it. So this superintendent says chronic absenteeism is often not about attendance only. Sometimes it's the first visible sign of deeper issues, including family instability, neglect, or harm. In these cases, the school's role is to notice, document, and connect with families with help, and connect families with help, excuse me. What I have to share with you today is not about broad trends or most families. It's about a small number of cases where the current law creates an unintentional loophole, allowing students to exit oversight precisely when their risk is highest. These situations raise not only educational concerns, but child welfare concerns that deserve the Senate's attention and dedicated language until the study is complete. Recently, we had the experience of working with a family whose student had missed approximately 40% of the required attendance days. While in school, the student was an attentive learner, was engaged with peers, was responsive to adults. Multiple offers of assistance by the student's trusted adults to lend support to the family in creative ways went unacknowledged. The family was eventually notified that the case would need to be reported to the court's consideration by our district's truancy officer. On the very same day, that Deputy State's Attorney Rick Nolan called my office to discuss next steps the court might take to engage the family. The parents submitted a home study enrollment letter to the school, and the student was disenrolled or de-enrolled on that day. At that moment, the student exited public school oversight. The chronic absenteeism framework of effective practices no longer applied. This situation involved prolonged disengagement by the family, not by the student, leading our team to develop a growing concern about the student's well-being. And there are other similar stories in this testimony that I think are really, really important, and we should consider. This amendment just, if you read it, there's nothing in here that triggers an investigation. There's nothing in here that would require removal or prevent a family from homeschooling. This just codifies that the superintendent will communicate with the AOE, and DCF will communicate with AOE in the event that there is, and you can see it here, concerns related to child welfare, educational neglect, or truancy. And that's what this is, and I would ask the Senate to consider this amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Bennington.
President, can we take a brief recess so that the Education Committee can meet over in that corner?
We'll take a brief recess. Please come to order. Senator from Bennington.
Mr. President, number one, want to thank the creator of the amendment for coming in, meeting with the committee yesterday afternoon. And I want to say that the committee is very interested and sympathetic to what she's trying to achieve, what the senator is trying to achieve with the amendment. But partially after hearing from a lot of people today via email, they have a point that we haven't taken testimony on this. We actually thought perhaps it was pretty simple. It turns out, as is often the case, it's not as simple as we thought it might have been. The fact of the matter is that we didn't have time to take testimony from DCF or the Agency of Education. And therefore, while this is something that will very likely be contained, in fact, will very likely be contained within the report that we're getting on next December. And the issues raised by the amendment are something that is worthy of exploration. But in the meantime, because we haven't had time to take testimony, the committee on a vote of 6-0-0 recommends that we not support this amendment at this moment in time.
Are you ready for the question? Senator from Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do not rise in any way to contradict my chair, but perhaps it even is illuminating for folks to know, essentially what was on the record yesterday when we considered the amendment, which was that we did vote 5-1 in favor of the amendment at the time. I completely understand the senator from Bennington being as circumspect as possible about the information that followed and the inability to then be able to say to people who wrote in that we had taken enough testimony on this specific wording and this specific language. But Mr. President, I want to rise to say that we did take testimony on the entire notion that we have 5,000 kids in home study who we have zero knowledge of, we are debating a larger education reform effort that has a lot to do with how are our kids doing? How are their proficiencies? How are our schools doing as we lose student population? And for the most part, I think it's fair to say that the many tens of people who wrote to each of us about this topic are probably deeply committed to their child's education and proficiencies and well beyond, and are model parents for us all. There are 5,000 kids that are in a homeschool setting, and we heard from DCF that they sometimes only get involved if AOE brings them in, and with kids we're talking about who may not have a lot of adults in their orbit, that became a question of how informal is our system to make sure our kids are safe and taken care of. And so, Mr. President, I in no way say that to insult the home study community. In fact, the first email we received when this amendment was up for consideration was from an individual who leads a homeschooling coalition who said it might have been good if we returned to the original language that was in the bill, which is something that I supported, that would have at least required us to have hearings when there is a concern about educational neglect or something more. And the Agency of Education said, and I struggle with money they spend on consultants and other things, they did not have the money to have even one of these hearings, to hire a quasi-judicial officer to have even one of these hearings. So we don't even know, Mr. President, how many of these home study situations might be eligible for a deeper look into concerns about not having proper education or something far worse. Mr. President, I will probably offer my vote in support of the senator from Chittenden Central in spirit and in word, and we will probably be overruled. But I would really like to stress that we should all be paying deep attention to this issue, and it should be an urgent matter for us to be taking up next biennium for whomever returns. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Chittenden Central.
I just wanted to briefly say, and I forgot to say it in my presentation of the testimony, that I did hear from the Agency of Education, and they are fine with this amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Chittenden Central.
Mr. President, I was wondering if the Chair of Education could repeat the results of the vote just taken. I am a bit confused at this point.
Senator from Bennington.
The committee voted to not support the amendment, 6-0.
Are you ready for the question? Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to rise in support of the amendment and thank the senator from Chittenden Central. She and I were both contacted by superintendents with major concerns about this area. And in fact, one of the superintendents in the Addison district has repeatedly said that this has repeatedly been an issue for students who have been removed from the school district for homeschooling when there have been concerns about truancy or lack of an educational program. And just to repeat what the senator from Chittenden Central said, the vast majority of families who homeschool their kids are doing so with good intentions and strong programs. There are just a few instances, probably in most of our school districts, where there are issues that need to be brought to the attention of people who can help to make sure that the student is getting a free and appropriate and equitable education. And while there needs to be more work done in this area, and the report in the bill is a good thing, I think in the interim, to make sure that we have eyes on the individual situations where this could be a problem for the health and safety and education of kids, this is an important step to take for the interim period. And I thank the senator from Chittenden Central. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wasn't going to rise, but now I feel I have to. The amendment has 2 sentences. And the first sentence regarding the superintendents may deserve discussion and continue potential, and it has some merit. Similar language exists before 2023, but even that language should have been discussed in committee and vetted through normal legislative process. It's the second sentence that concerns me the most. The superintendent and the Department of Children and Family shall notify the agency if there is a documented and unresolved concern relating to the child's welfare, education neglect, or truancy involving the student to the extent allowed by the law. This language has never appeared in Vermont Home Study Statute. Yet it creates a new mandate on both superintendents and the Department of Children and Families without meaningful discussion, implementation, resources, standards, or process protections. The Department of Children and Family and the Agency of Education were not consulted about how this will work. Would the homeschool family now be subject to the Department of Children and Family database review? What happens if the concerns are reported after enrollment occurs? What authority would the agency then have? These are not small questions. They are questions that we should have been answered before this amendment reached the Senate floor. The large issue is process. The larger issue is process. Major changes affecting parental rights should not be drafted and advanced in the last minute without testimonies or stakeholders' review and careful legislation considered. For this reason, I am voting no on this amendment, and I suggest the body do the same, and I request a roll call.
Roll call has been requested, and when the vote is taken, it shall be by roll. Senator from Chittenden.
Mr. President, I would request a very brief recess and ask that the members of education meet me over in this corner. Maybe 2 minutes.
We'll take a brief recess. I'm learning this time because I haven't all day. Will the Senate please come to order? Senator from Bennington.
Mr. President, it appears that when we huddled in the corner, I misunderstood the intent of one member, so the vote is actually 5-1-0.
Are you ready for the question? The question is, shall the Senate proposal of amendment be amended as offered by Senator Ulick? Roll call has been requested, and the secretary shall call the roll.
Senator Baru.
No.
Senator Beck.
No.
Senator Benson.
No.
Senator Bonner.
No.
Senator Brennan.
No.
Senator Brock.
No.
Senator Chittenden.
No.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Collmore.
No.
Senator Cummings.
No.
Senator Bueller.
Yes.
Senator Hardy.
Yes.
Senator Harrison.
No.
Senator Hashim.
No.
Senator Heffernan.
Nay.
Senator Ingle.
No.
Senator Lyons.
No.
Senator Major.
No.
Senator Matos.
No.
Senator Morley.
No.
Senator Norris.
No.
Senator Kirschler.
No.
Senator Plunkett.
No.
Senator Ron Hinsdale.
Yes.
Senator Bohowski.
Yes.
Senator Watson.
No.
Senator Weeks.
No.
Senator Westman.
No.
Senator White.
Yes.
Senator Williams.
Those voting yes, 6. Those voting no, 24, and the amendment has failed. Are there any amendments prior to third reading? Listen to the third reading of the bill.
H 930, an act relating to addressing and preventing chronic absenteeism.
The question is, shall the bill pass in concurrence with proposal of amendment? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we have passed H 930 in concurrence with proposal of amendment. T-bill. We have on the calendar for action H 944. It was passed by the House on April 30th of 2026. It was referred to the Committee on Transportation, which reports it has considered the bill and recommends that the Senate propose to the House that the bill be amended as it appears starting on page 2427 of today's calendar, and that with such proposal of amendment, the bill ought to pass. Affecting the revenues of the state, the bill was referred to the Committee on Finance, which recommends that the bill ought to pass in concurrence with proposal of amendment as recommended by the Committee on Transportation with further proposal of amendment. Affecting the expenditures of the state, the bill was referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which recommends that the bill ought to pass in concurrence with proposal of amendment as recommended by the Committee on Transportation and Finance with further proposal of amendment as found in today's calendar. Listen to the second reading of the bill.
H 944, an act relating to the fiscal year 2027 transportation program and miscellaneous changes to laws related to transportation.
Recognize the senator from Lamoille District, Senator Westman, for the report of the Committee on Transportation.
Mr. President, I stand here, usually you say your thank yous at the end of a speech, or you talk about who testified in it. This is for transportation. We're in a little bit of extraordinary times. The basis of a lot of this and the decision-making for this year's budget really started last fall when the agency cut 31 positions out and started moving in a direction. So the first thing I'd like to do is we wouldn't be here today if we hadn't had great help from our committee assistant, Megan. JFO has been great. Both Logan and Chris there, in Ledge Council, Damien, who's sitting right here. And in the agency, Michelle, Michelle and Patrick, and Michelle's retiring, and her party's next week. We've had great help from all of them. And the committee has worked very hard, and I want to thank all the members of the committee and all the work they put in, because we have had pretty extraordinary help from all of them. I have 3 pages of testimony on the bill itself. I have a full page of testimony on the vehicle miles traveled piece. We heard from everybody from 4 different states in Utah, Hawaii, Oregon, Virginia. We took testimony from. That testimony we started for us back in December when we met on this. We had 3 hearings this year. We had 1 hearing on medical transports with the Health and Welfare Committee in the Senate. And so those pieces we had 2 hearings with House Transportation this year, one on aviation and one from, with the League of Cities and Towns and all of it. All that as a backdrop is, there's a lot of work in HIS. And we spent a tremendous amount of time on all of this. What you're going to find in this bill is pieces about purchase and use. The Transportation Committee proposed steps with purchase and use that would have moved all of the purchase and use tax back. That's not ultimately what we will end up here today doing after the bill came from finance and the amendments that you've got, but there will be steps in the purchase and use tax. The ultimate base will be that purchase and use tax will move, start to move 1 year of what would have been a 5-year plan, but do just 1 year, and about $10 million back. That money you will see mostly in paving, but you will see it someplace spread out through the rest of the agency. You'll see movements in paving, and particularly in the SHIM program, which deals with basically your worst roads and potholes. It's what I like to refer to as the Band-Aid area in that, and we will talk about that. You'll see vehicle miles traveled in this. You'll see us talk about bonding in this. You'll see we did have language that was in this bill and will get somewhat reported on in this bill that is ended up in the big bill about local option taxes and in that area. And then you'll see a continuation of the effort that we tried for to recruit people for medical transports in that. That's a high level of what you'll see here. But on the ground within the agency, and you have this sheet in front of you, it's not all a rosy story within the agency. And I think the numbers speak for itself. This sheet, joint fiscal put together for us, and it really gives you goals versus funding within the agency. In the first block that you'll see, and this is what the upshot of this bill will do. In the first block you see in paving, we have 320 miles of interstate. This will pave 46 miles in interstate. It will leave about 17.5% of our interstates in poor or very poor condition. The state highway system is 2,700 miles. Our goal is to pave around 270 once every 10 years. There is in this budget 56 miles or 2%, and will leave about 33% of the roads in the state in poor or very poor condition. That 56 miles represents that for the 2,700 miles, we're on a cycle to pave, if we continue this cycle into the future, we would pave most state highways once every 50 years. In Class 1 town highway, which we maintain, there's about 140 miles. This pays 4 miles of that. The track we're on is a track that by 2030, 60% of our roads will be in very poor condition. One would ask, well, with those numbers, where would you go in the rest of your transportation budget to get money? And in the next block, you're going to see in buildings, our goal is to have 85% of the buildings in very good condition. At the end of this budget year, the prediction is we'll be at 70% of those buildings in good condition. In central garage, where we buy equipment, roughly we're short about a little over $5 million. We have 86 plow trucks need replacing, means that they will be over 8 years old. This budget has 15. We have 43% or 37 pickups need replacing. This budget has 20. We have 21 loaders that don't meet the goal. This budget does 1. In maintenance, we have seen huge reductions because of rescissions last fall. The maintenance budget is 4.7 million less than the 26 budget. We have reduced by 2.3 million in reductions in personnel through RIFs. There is 1.5 million reduction in the stockpile of salt and sand that you will see in this. And that's really highly dependent on what the winters look like, but there are huge reductions in the maintenance division, which is the largest single division within the agency. In town highways, and town highways have had a 60% increase. The estimation of cost increase for construction across the state is that we have seen a 60% increase in the cost of road construction across the state. That same issue of increase in 60% in the cost have hit the towns very hard. This budget has a 2.7% increase for towns. Town highway, so that's the town highway aid piece. In public transit, and I will quote the numbers because we don't have really great numbers across everyone, but for those that are in the Green Mountain Transit area, which is the largest transit agency in the state, they have a $1 million shortfall in their budget this year. Next year's is predicted to be 2.7, and they have cut to this point in the last couple of years about 16% of their routes. In personnel in the agency, we cut 31 after the downgrade last July. This April, this past month, we reduced the number of positions by another 31. So since last July, we've reduced by 62 positions the number of positions within the Agency of Transportation, and that's out of about 1,200 positions across the agency. I only bring this all up and say this because I think the body needs to hear what the 5 of us on the Transportation Committee have struggled with all the way through this process and since last fall and have dealt with. It is, I think the numbers all speak to themselves, and this sheet is directly out of our joint fiscal office and put together by them and is as clear as they can make it about where we are. We really have no division within the Agency of Transportation that is not struggling to keep up. At this point, we will go through the bill, and I will yield to the senator from Windsor, Wyndham, Senator Harrison.
Senator from Lamoille yields to the senator from Wyndham.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Chair. I am going to cover sections 1 through 14 of the T-bill. It's in your calendar, starting on page 24, 27. You're going to hear many of the same concerns because we were all united. And section 1 is legislative findings, and that's something that the Senate added. That's not in the House. And I'm not going to read all the findings, but they explain where we are. And they do a really good job of illustrating the overall problem we're trying to solve. So in number 1, the 2025 Transportation Fund revenues came in nearly 7.4 million below the revenue forecast. In item number 3, revenues from the taxes on gasoline and diesel fuel are projected to gradually decrease because of improving vehicle fuel efficiency among all vehicles. On number 5, in contrast with the slow growth in revenues, the National Highway Construction Cost Index increased by approximately 62% between 2020 and 2025. Number 8, continuing deficits threaten the state's ability to provide the required match for federal funds, which make up more than half of the state's annual transportation budget. On the next page, number 9, municipalities face the same cost pressures as the state, increasing pressure on the property tax. So transportation really has a huge impact, and we need to understand this. Number 10, and now I'm on page 24, 28 of the calendar. Restoring the system, or not restoring the system to a state of good repair will cost significantly more if we're unable to keep up with the maintenance and capital needs. So it's not as if the roads are just waiting patiently for us to come. They're getting worse, and it's going to be more expensive the longer we wait. And number 11, this is for us. Prompt legislative action is necessary to ensure the future health and stability of the Transportation Fund and to enable the Agency of Transportation to keep Vermont's transportation system in a state of good repair. This is not a drill. Okay, section 2, which is on 2428, adopts the FY27 transportation program. This section is the fundamental core of the committee's work. VTrans proposes the updated schedule and budget for town and state highways, bridges, and paving projects. The schedule and the budget is called the White Book, and members of the committee have copies if senators would like to review projects in their districts. This year, a frustrating number of projects were either reduced in scope and/or pushed out to future years because of funding constraints. Section 3, this section describes transportation investments that will also reduce greenhouse gas emissions and fossil fuel use and save Vermont households money. It includes a high-level summary of funding for park and rides, bike and pedestrian facilities, public transit programs, environmental mitigation related to clean water and stormwater, and the rail program. It details the towns in which the various types of projects are scheduled. Section 4 is paving, and paving that is a statewide district leveling. This is the Band-Aid referred to by the chair. District leveling is a thin overlay to improve the roadway surface. This bill adds 1.7 million, which is so small, it's almost laughable, honestly, from the Transportation Fund to the statewide district leveling proposed budget of 149.8 million. So 150 million is the budget. We're able to add 1.7 million, and that was a lift. So it's a 1.1% increase. The source of this funding is in section 5. This section replaces 1.5 million from the Transportation Fund with 1.75 million from the Transportation Fund with 1.75 million from the Transportation Infrastructure Bond
fund in the state highway bridge program. Even though we haven't issued TIBs since 2013, the revenue that was pledged still goes to the TIB fund, and we'll discuss the TIB fund more in sections 13 and 14. So as the chair mentioned, sections 6 through 10 were deleted from this bill by the Appropriations Committee and are now in the Appropriations Bill. And those will be discussed in that committee's report. So if you're in the calendar, you can now go to page 2439. Sections 11 and 12 were deleted by the Finance Committee because they adopted a different approach in the miscellaneous tax bill. That will be reported by the Finance Committee. Section 13 is a new section. This is an authority to issue transportation infrastructure bonds for FY 2028 and 2032. You've heard multiple times, and you're going to hear more. It's truly our biggest challenge. Vermont needs additional revenue to bring our transportation infrastructure into good condition and to maintain that level of service. Transportation infrastructure bonds are just what they sound like. Bonds from which the proceeds are used for transportation infrastructure. They are not the GO bonds that we discussed in the capital bill, but rather special obligation bonds with specific revenue sources. The reason to consider TIBs is that the annual amount of the payment on the bonds is significantly lower than it is when we do pay-as-you-go, which is what we are doing now. Increasing taxes to the amount necessary to keep our infrastructure in good shape has not been a viable option. We have not been able to keep up with basic maintenance, and the future costs are higher the longer we delay these projects. Responsible debt used by governments is a way to provide the necessary upkeep of public infrastructure at a lower annual cost. In a sample scenario provided by the Treasurer's Office, the annual payment on a $50 million TIB bond would be $3.6 million per year. Accounting for inflation, the total payment over 20 years is comparable to paying $50 million over 3 or 5 years, which would cost between 18 to 10 million respectively. I'm happy to share this chart with the senators if you'd like to go more deeply into this, because it in the long run, it saves money because it funds the infrastructure. And also in the long run, it costs about the same amount. Responsible bonding of projects with a long useful life is more fair over time because the cost of the project is shared by future users. I want to say that again. Responsible bonding of projects with a long useful life is more fair over time because the cost of the project is shared by future users. We are a government that is responsible for the future as well as for the current situation. So bonding is very different than a mortgage of a house, for example, which you're happy when you finish the mortgage, and that's a good thing for a family. But for a government that's responsible for the future, we need to plan for the future and act for the future. So getting into not too many details, but the process. Issuing bonds would require the same annual review by the Capital Debt Affordability Advisory Committee that is used in the capital bill. They would report on the responsible amount of TIB bonds that could be issued, including how they would impact the rating agency's assessment of Vermont's debt. The authority for the state treasurer to issue these bonds would not go into effect until FY 2028 to provide for more analysis and review. The proposal is for funding for up to 5 years, FY 28 through 32, subject to legislative approval each year. So section 14 is related, and this is the more analysis and review. It requires significant and necessary analysis before any authorization of TIB to begin FY 28. Including TIB funding in our transportation financing structure is not something to enter into lightly. This section gives the treasurer's office time to work with their consultants to more fully analyze the financial costs and benefits. For example, the funding sources we pledged previously were a 3 cent per gallon of diesel fuel tax and 2% of the retail price of each gallon of motor fuel. Other states have used additional sources such as registration fees, sales on cars and trucks, licenses, and other sources which could support the credit and decrease the payment. At the same time as this financial review, the Agency of Transportation would provide scenarios for the FY28 transportation program, both with and without bonding, including a comparison of costs for the affected projects. They would also include a comparison of the project schedules, which is key to safe roadways and long-term expenses to the state. The benefits of investing in the infrastructure could then be considered against the cost of the bonding by next year's legislature. So the numbers do speak for themselves, and we need to listen. I will now yield to the senator from Washington.
The senator from Wyndham yields to the senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to be covering sections 15 through 23. This is all about the MBUF of the mileage-based user fee. So I had this chart passed out. I want to just start with that because this basically shows the problem that we're trying to address, which shows you in the last 10 years, we've gone from receiving $78 million in fuel tax revenue down to $53 million, and the projection is for that just to continue. This is because of fuel efficient vehicles. So we're just selling less gas. Our gas tax is almost always on a per gallon basis. So even if as cars get more efficient, even if they're buying the same amount of gas, driving the same amount of miles, they're buying less gas. So we've seen less fuel being purchased because we have more fuel efficient vehicles, even more so on a vehicle that doesn't buy fuel. But mostly of this is just fuel efficiency because we only have 12,000 electric vehicles today. Most of this decline has been in efficiency gains in vehicles, but there's also been some less miles driven during the COVID period. We saw a big jump, but really didn't see that return. So this kind of sets the problem that we're having, that we're trying to address with the mileage-based user fee. The other thing of this whole section starts with findings, and I just want to say something about findings. When I joined the Senate 8 years ago, I was trained by the senior senators in the two committees I was on to have a strong aversion to findings. The only thing that the senior senators in the committees liked about findings was to take them out, especially if they were added by members of the other body. So here I find myself presenting a bill that I voted for that has two sets of findings. We have a whole set of like 2 pages of findings at the beginning, and then in the middle of the bill, which I don't know if I've ever seen a bill like this, another set of findings. But I'll just point out a couple of findings. So on page 2440, the findings start, section 15, the findings in intent language. But the two important ones are on 2441, 9 and 10. There's other findings, but I would say these are 2 you would want to, example of what we're trying to do. So 9 is Vermont taxes on gasoline and diesel fuel were last increased in 2014, and the federal changes weren't since 1993. Even if with the price of gas that we pay today, which seems high, still on an inflation-adjusted basis, we're paying about what we paid in 1980. So even with the 2% TIV, the transportation fund, we added a percentage because we didn't want everything just be on the gallons, because we thought fuel was going to increase. It's actually been level. So even with the 2%, we're not getting any more because of inflation on gas prices, because they've been amazingly steady for the last 22 years. Before I get into some of the intent language, I want to say what we're doing now. So a couple of years, we've been addressing this. This graph that I show you has been an issue for years. So the 8 years that I've been on transportation, we've talked about the decline in fuel revenue, and now we have to do something about it. So a couple of years ago, we did create an infrastructure fee where anybody driving an electric vehicle or a plug-in hybrid has to pay an infrastructure fee, $89 for electric car, half of that $44.50 for a hybrid. And that's been going on for the last 2 years. That money doesn't even go to the transportation fund to fix the roads. It goes to an infrastructure fee to help more chargers. Because there's these new electric vehicles, there weren't enough places to charge, particularly for those that didn't have their own homes. So apartment buildings, multifamily housing. So that money was going specifically to increase the charging capacity we had in those sections. So that's what's happening now. EVs and plug-in hybrid owners are paying $89 or $45, $44.50. And that's going to the EV charging program. So we're changing that. So I just want to point out these intent language of the mileage-based user fee that we have on 2442. There's 3 numbers of intent. First one is that we implement a mileage-based user fee for BEVs, which is battery electric vehicles, which will replace the existing fee that I just talked about, the $89, starting on January 1st, 2027. And that the owners of these electric vehicles contribute to the transportation fund an amount that reflects the annual miles traveled. 2, which is getting good, there's amendments that change this a little bit, but this is an intent that ensures all owners of light-duty motor vehicles contribute to the transportation fund in an amount that reflects the annual miles traveled. So this is about transitioning this mileage-based user fee beyond electric vehicles to all vehicles by 2031. And the third one is that we would intend to develop and implement a mileage-based user fee in a manner that does not discourage the ownership of battery electric vehicles and fuel-efficient vehicles, consistent with our intent of the Global Warming Solutions Act and the state's climate action plan. So I'll move on to section 16, which is kind of the main part of the mileage-based user fee. First, there's the definitions. You'll see on the top of page 2443, covered vehicles. And covered vehicles is the term you'll see throughout the bill, because over time, the covered vehicles could change, whether they're electric. Right now, starting in 2027, it's just going to be electric vehicles. So that's what a covered vehicle is for the near future. There's a section in here that says about how people will pay the this fee. There's going to be 4 ways that you can pay the mileage-based user fee. You can have it paid just at the end. You could pay it on a quarterly basis, kind of like estimated income tax. You could do it pay as you go, like something that the Department of Motor Vehicles would have to establish, but it would be like odometer readings throughout the year, so you don't have one big payment at the end. Or you can just pay a flat fee of $178, which is also a fee that cap. And it sets the fee at 1.4 cents. And 1.4 cents isn't just an arbitrary number. That's the number if you take the current average number of miles driven in a vehicle that has the average miles per gallon, that would equate to about 1.4 cents per mile in gas tax. So it kind of holds people harmless to what they're paying now in gas tax today. And it caps it at $178 a year, which is like 12,000 something miles, which is about the average miles driven. So it sets this maximum fee, which also addresses the issue of people driving out of state. So if you're paying per mile, but you take a trip to Los Angeles in your vehicle and drive all the way back, is it fair that you pay Vermont transportation fees for all the miles that you drove? So by capping it at the beginning, that would address that issue, that you're really only going to be paying an amount about the average miles driven in Vermont. There's other parts of the bill that also address this in the future. The section requires submission of mileage reports, which is just when you go to get your car inspected, they're already reading your odometer. This is to just report the odometer reading to Department of Motor Vehicles so that they can assess the mileage-based user fee. It provides conditions if you don't get an inspection or you don't get to submit the odometer reading, that you'll just have to pay the $178 flat fee. It permits the commissioner that if you don't pay the mileage-based user fee, they can deny your registration. It sets out powers of the commissioner to implement this whole chapter in establishing the mileage-based user fee. It also permits individuals to file administrative appeals related to the program and the fee if they disagree with the commissioner's decision to the Superior Court. Section 17 On 2449, this updates the name of the EV infrastructure fee just to be called the infrastructure fee. As I said, the intent is to move this to other vehicles beyond electric vehicles. Section 18 on 2450, this is the transition. So as I said, in 2027, on January 1st, 2027 is when the mileage-based user fee would start. But you don't pay it on January 1st. You really won't see a difference. If you don't drive an electric vehicle or plug-in hybrid vehicle, you won't see a difference at all for the first few years. But if you have an electric vehicle or a plug-in hybrid, you won't see a difference until the second, your first registration after your second inspection. And I have a handout here, but it gets complicated and I didn't want you to be all looking at this and not listening to me. So after my presentation, I'm going to hand this out. It has some neat infographics that try to show this, but basically you're going to get an odometer reading. You're going to get your car inspected. That'll set the odometer reading at the beginning of the mileage-based fee. So your first inspection in 2027 is where they set the base. And then you probably have a registration in there and you'll pay the $89. And then your next inspection, the following year, they'll do another odometer rating and then say, okay, you drove X miles times 1.4 cents, here's how much you owe. So for an example, if you drove 10,000 miles in that time frame, in your year between inspections, you would owe $140, right? 1.4 cents times 10,000. But if you paid the $89 at your registration fee, you've already paid $89 of that 140. So the difference of 140 and 89 is $51. So you would only owe $51. If you paid the 2-year, you can still do the 2-year registration for an EV. So instead of paying $89, you pay double that, $178. So if you did 2-year registration and you came in for that 10,000 miles, owed 140, you would have paid $38 more. So you just have that $38 credit would follow you to your next year. If you only drew 5,000 miles, that would only be $70. So you'd have, and you paid 89, so you would have a $19 credit the next year. There's a lot of time before this actually, any Vermonter will see a really an impact. Right now, it's only the 12,000 electric vehicles, and I think we have 3,000 plug-in hybrids or something. It's a small number. They won't see this until really like 28, because they have 2 odometer readings and a registration after that second odometer. And I should just say about how this fixes this problem of this graph. It's not going to reverse this graph. The mileage-based user fee is not a way to generate more revenue. It's a way to stop the slide. It will set people kind of the flat what they're paying now. And if they stay the same amount of miles driven, we will just see a leveling off. So we won't see a continued decrease. As Senator Wyndham said, we need more revenue to really fix the problem. This will just prevent us from digging the hole any deeper. And it will only do it for part of the fleet of vehicles unless we switch it to a lot more vehicles. So section 19 on page 2451 requires AOT and DMV to do outreach and education and do some research with a user experience and issue back a report. Section 20 is a whole user fee transition plan to switch this, to move this mileage-based user vehicle to other mileage-based user fee to other vehicles. So AOT would have to develop a plan on the expansion of the mileage-based user fee, and they would have to issue that plan by 2029. And then 2029 is the goal for hybrids and other fuel-efficient gas vehicles, and by 2031 to all vehicles under 10,000 pounds. And this plan must include options for tracking mileage, including an option that allows owners and lessees to only pay for miles traveled in Vermont, a sliding scale of fees or credits for those that are still paying gasoline. So if you're a gas car and you're paying the mileage-based fee, you don't want to be double taxed for the gas you're buying and the mileage fee. So there'd be like a prebate based on your miles per gallon. So we think you're going to pay this much in gas tax based on your miles, but you would get that, if you pay that gas tax, they would prebate it. And then when you get the odometer reading, it'll get trued up to what you actually So, but that's only if we move to gas cars, because there's amendments on that, so I won't go too far into that. So the initial report with a proposal for legislation is really due January 31st of 2027. And it requires a submission of July 30 of 2028 of the implementation plan for moving to other vehicles. Section 21, 22, and 23 are all going to be amended. I think they might need to be going to be amended twice, but in the original bill, Section 21 is the section that changes the vehicle covered from just electric vehicles to high mileage vehicles, gas vehicles, plug-in hybrids, and hybrids. Section 22, which is the part in the original bill that moves this to all vehicles under 10,000 pounds by 2031. Section 23 in the original version had the MBUF being adjusted by inflation, so that you do have an increase in the revenue over time. But as I said, that's going to be amended. So those are all the sections on the mileage-based user fee. Like I said, I'm just going to put this on your desks. You can read it over the weekend if you're really interested. Obviously, happy to answer other questions about it. At this time, I'd like to yield to the Senior Center from Grand Isle.
Senator from Washington yields to the senator from Grand Isle.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate that. I'll be reporting sections 24 through 39, and I'll start off with section 24, which is rules regarding municipal heavy equipment loan fund. We repealed that section. It has obsolete rules for heavy equipment loan fund, which has been superseded by the Act, I think in 2025, Act 27, governing municipal equipment. It's basically administrative cleanup. Section 25 amends 19 VSA policy on highways and bridges. Makes technical amendments again to clarify provisions relating to Vermont standards for roadway design and application of certain federal signage requirements. Requires warning signs and markings to be aligned with 23 VSA 1025. Section 26 amends 19 VSA Section 10, increases the contract amount by which the secretary may waive bonding requirements. It takes it from $100,000 to $250,000. And it also permits the secretary to totally waive bonding requirements in case of emergencies such as temporary stabilization during emergency. Section 27 brings the state, it has to do with bridge inspections and closures. It brings state into compliance with national bridge inspection standards regarding inspections, postings, and closing of bridges. It also establishes a new penalty of up to $1,000 for anyone violating the posting of a closure or bridge. It's a civil penalty. Section 28 makes technical amendments for consistency in traffic violations as defined. It makes violation of a bridge posting or a closure of traffic violations. And this has to do with tire chain up locations, instances at Smuggler's Notch, where we've already had, I think, one this year already. It increases fines from $1,000 to $10,000. And you'll be hearing about that later in the bill, I believe. Section 29 amends 24 VSA 5084. It basically has to do with Public Transit Advisory Council. It amends membership of that council, replaces COVE, Community of Vermont Elders, with a member of AARP. COVE is no longer around, they've been dissolved. Also combines representation of a bunch of private bus operators into a single member, and eliminates taxi service member on that board because that position has not been filled in several years. Moving on to section 30, Green Mountain Transit Authority, their annual budget and assessments. It permits GMTA's annual budget to include voluntary member contributions, which haven't been allowed in the past, grants, donations, and other non-assessment revenue. Permits GMT to pursue private contributions, grants and donations, etc. Provides that all voluntary contributions do not affect member contributions. Section 31 amends the sunset of the Agency of Transportation Public-Private Partnership. It extends that from 7/1/26 to 7/1/29, a very beneficial program, and it will allow that continue through 2029. Section 32 amends 19 VSA, the Transportation Board powers and duties. It limits review of Section 111 permits and decisions to appeals by the applicant or the permittee. Section 33, Transportation Alternative Grant Program. That will increase the maximum grant amount in that program from $300,000 to $600,000. It eliminates the requirement that 50% of the program be funded, the program funds be reserved for environmental mitigation projects, and instead lets grants be issued for any eligible activity with, such as salt and sand sheds and safe routes for non-drivers, and it includes environmental mitigation. Section 34, Transportation Alternative Grant Programs, again, increases the maximum grant amount for state fiscal year 2027 to 1.2 million, up from 600,000, so it doubles that. Section 35, Municipal Transportation Programs, ongoing evaluation, identification of improvements. This section directs the agency to continue work in consultation with the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, planners, development agencies on studies from the 2025 P-bill related to cancellation of locally managed projects and identifying potential efficiencies related to town highway aid and the municipal grant programs. It also directs the agency in consultation with all those entities to examine laws related to setting speed limits, to identify opportunities to simplify and clarify those statutes to meet local needs related to safety and context sensitivity. Requires recommendations for legislative action in a study to be submitted in January of 2027. Section 36 appropriates $242,000 to continue the agency's partnership with Drive Electric Vermont. This makes them whole. We heard testimony that they did not have the funds to make it through the year, and this brings them to the end of the fiscal year. Section 37 has to do with the sale of the Caledonia County Airport. It deletes the requirement that the agency ensure, in language that said, it ensures that the airport continue to be identified as a public use airport in a national plan of integrated airport systems until 2050. So this removes that requirement. Section 38 extends the sunset of authority, which would have expired a couple days ago, actually, 5/1/2026 to 11/1/27. And that is an ongoing endeavor. The last section I have would be section 39, public transit demand response. This is a very important section. It appropriates $400,000 from the T fund to AOT to provide grants to public transit agencies that would support recruitment and retention for volunteer drivers and mobility management activities related to medical transport. We have a serious shortage of medical transport drivers, and this will go a long way to helping recruit new volunteer drivers. With that, Mr. President, I would yield to the member from Windsor, Senator White.
Senator from Grand Isle yields to the senator from Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a real honor to have this be my 6th of 8 possible presentations of the transportation bill as a senator. As you just heard from the previous senator, we have section 39. You're now moving to section 40. So you are going to find that on in your today's calendar, starting on page 2466. To begin, may I read a commentary from the Brattleboro Reformer?
You may.
My sections cover electric vehicles, and I want to read a quote from an article that I think will describe why we put these sections in. To quote, there is a frustrating status quo holding back electric vehicle sales and costing American jobs. Many charging providers do not share live data of their equipment, basic stuff like whether it's working or it's broken. This discourages prospective EV drivers, with concerns about public charging being the #1 reason people do not buy electric vehicles, according to J.D. Power surveys, and also from published data that we've seen. The solution is simple and cheap. If all chargers reported their statuses live so that any mapping app could include this basic information, drivers could easily navigate to working and available chargers. Were this data available, the charger's status would appear in your favorite map app, much like Google Maps showing a restaurant is open. This would go a long way towards eliminating range anxiety. And that's from the Brattleboro Reformer. And the reason I bring it to you is because we decided to do that exact simple fix as outlined in the article. What we do in section 4 is add definitions. Section 40 is we add definitions related to charging stations and charging station networks. So we can set ourselves up for section 41, which requires that EV charging stations that are installed or reconditioned on or after September 30th, 2026, that they must provide real-time information regarding their location, status, type of charging equipment, charging speed, think level 1, level 2, level 3 that we've discussed in this room before, and payment methods that are available to third-party software developers to allow the data to be available to drivers through EV charging applications. So if you are an electric vehicle driver like myself and you don't have information about the charging station you're going to, well, we're fixing that frustrating problem for you in section 40 and section 41. Further, in section 42, we work to address EV charging concerns related to unreasonable restrictions in the application, installation of electric vehicle chargers within pre-existing communities. What are we talking about there? We're talking about condos. We're talking about condominiums. So what we do in section 42 is that we make those common interest communities not be able to place unreasonable restrictions in section 42. And then in section 43, we give examples of where we would permit communities to enact reasonable requirements, including compliance with architectural standards, installations by licensed electricians, the payment of cost of installation, repair, and operation by the owners. So trying to create a standard for when a common interest community can say, no charger here, but not eliminating the ability of someone living in a condo from accessing charging that is reasonable close to their home. Section 44 and 45 are going to be deleted by a finance amendment you're going to hear. But I will briefly touch on them because I believe the reason your Transportation Committee was so firm in their inclusion and disappointed by the finance amendment was because of the outlined revenue shortfalls that were described repeatedly. What Section 44 would have done is it would have created a 2% surcharge on the sale of jet fuel. That seems pretty reasonable to me. Section 45 was also deleted by finance, but it would have formally permitted the deposit of said jet fuel surcharge to the transportation fund. So rather than our regular daily drivers funding jet travel, we would be having the opposite situation where we would be getting that revenue back to drivers, so we're not funding our airports with vehicle drivers. Section 46 is a bill that is a section of the bill that I'm very proud of. If you were following S-258, the super speeders bill, one of the large agreements that our committee came to at the beginning of the session was that safety was the #1 priority of our committee. Driver, pedestrian, and anyone in and around our roads. And what this seeks to do is requires that the Department of Motor Vehicles evaluate and report back on the potential for implementing intelligent speed assistance programs in Vermont. If you have followed S-258, that's colloquially known as the super speeders bill. The idea here is that an intelligent speed assistant program would act as like a governor so that you can't go over a certain speed. So if you're in your car, it's like like the breathalyzer when you get a DUI, you would now be unable to, after a certain number of significant speeding violations, your car would be unable to go over the speed limit with a device. So we're going to study that in section 46 so that we can have more safe roads and reduce the repetitive super speeder problem that has cost lives and property damage in our state. Section 47 through 49 are pretty rote. I would say that for section 47, it's as simple as the federal government does what the Public Utility Commission was tasked with. So we're doing cleanup here by deleting outdated language related to the PUC's jurisdiction over the transportation of explosives. We would like the federal government to continue that regulation though. Section 47 also deletes outdated, section 48 also moves to reflect that the Transportation Board has jurisdiction over public transit agencies rather than the Public Utilities Commission. And section 49 updates again the jurisdiction for the Transportation Board related to public transit agencies rather than the Public Utilities Commission. With that, I would thank you for your patience and attention, and I would ask to yield to the senior senator from Lamoille.
Senator from Windsor yields to the senator from Lamoille.
Yeah, the only senator from Lamoille. I promise we're almost done. What my sections are is 50 through the end of the bill, but from section 50 to 55 is the cleanup of really what I would call ancient language. It deals with log drives on rivers. And we had, the PUC came before us and said, any responsibility to deal with rivers is natural resources. So section 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, and 55 deals with log drives on rivers and puts the Natural Resources Agency in charge of that. And that language was brought to us by the PUC and their legislative liaison. Section 56 is vehicle history information. And for anybody that has used Carfax or bumper.com, and that the assertion was by some people that had come before our committee was that information wasn't really as good as they had expected. They were surprised that the history of the vehicle didn't match the information that they got. We really didn't have time to dig into this deeply, but have asked for a report back, and you'll find the report from DMV, the Attorney General's office, and this report will help us move forward with that issue in section 56. Section 57 are the effective dates, but those will change as we look at, as we get to the Finance Committee amendments and the appropriation amendments. Lastly, you have one more handout. And I'm not going to belabor the point. One talks about the cost growth, and if we measure that against what the National Highway Construction Cost Index is versus what our revenue estimates are from that have come out of the emergency board, and this came out of the estimations for the growth in our revenue from Tom Cavett. You also have the page on paving conditions and from the agency, the projections in the future. And finally, what you will see is, and I felt they needed to say something about this. When the Agency of Transportation signs contracts with paving companies and construction companies, they sign, it's a fixed contract for everything except for asphalt and fuel costs. So the variable within their contracts is the cost of asphalt and the cost of diesel fuel for the most part. And if you look on the last page of this handout, with the increases in diesel fuel, and diesel fuel right now is around $6 a gallon, it will mean that we have to do a price adjustment this summer of basically 1.4 million on that side. And on the asphalt side, 2.5 million. So we're going to, at the passage of this, with those variables within contracts, will mean that we're probably going to be looking at $4 million immediately as this passed if fuel costs don't drop this summer. At this point, what I would say is the Transportation Committee, we voted unanimously 5-0 to bring this to you. Not everything here isn't difficult, and not everyone is going to like everything that we did in this. This budget and this T-bill reflects change, and none of us really like change, and change we're all quite adverse to in this. But we made some hard decisions, and we recommended change based upon the facts that we're faced. And we don't know what else to do but bring you our honest assessment, what we think we can do, what we think we can do moving forward. And it's not all popular, but change is demanded here. And I would say to our transportation system and our roads, we all use every day. And the system is too important for us not to bring you some difficult decisions.
Recognize the senator from Chittenden, Senator Chittenden.
Thank you,
for the
Mr.
report of the
President.
Committee on Finance.
In a moment, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve a substitute amendment that senators will find on page 2479 to the Senate Finance Committee report. And just so that nobody thinks I'm getting spicy, this came to us as a full approval for this substitute amendment from Senate Transportation, and also be reporting on the vote out of Senate Finance. That was a joke for a senator that's not quite here who accuses me of being spicy with my floor speeches. All right. The other thing I want to say is, with all these great visuals, wouldn't it be really helpful if there was like a big screen up here projecting? That's a conversation for another day. All right. So, Mr. President, I move that the committee report from Senate Finance be substituted with the amendment from me published in the calendar on page 2479.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee on Finance be substituted as offered by the senator from Chittenden Southeast? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries. Senator from Chittenden.
All right, Mr. President. Unless there is any objections from Mr. President, I do intend to speak to both the original Senate Finance Committee report and the substitute amendment.
Without objection.
So your Senate Finance Committee originally recommended simply removing several sections from the bill. However, through ongoing discussions that occurred after passing it out of committee, following those removals, a compromise was reached with the Committee on Transportation. They brought forward a proposal that Senate Finance has now adopted as this substitute amendment from our original committee amendment. I'll now walk through both the substitute amendment and highlight where it differs from our original report. Sections 11 and 12 had to do with the purchase and use spoken to during the presentation of the bill. Those sections involved how the purchase and use tax allocation was configured. An alternative to this was discussed at length in committee and was ultimately rolled into the miscellaneous tax bill, which this body passed out about a week ago. Because of that, Senate Finance is proposing to delete these sections from H 944 in both the original report from the committee and the substitute. In sections 21, 22, and 23, this is where the real differences are from the original committee report and what you have before you with this substitute. Initially, Senate Finance stripped out all of the out-year enactments of the mileage-based usage fee for pleasure cars. Our thinking was that because these dates were 3+ years away and because a comprehensive report funded by $3 million in federal grant money is currently being developed, it was most prudent to leave enactment to the next biennium. We felt future legislators would be better positioned with more information on the practical implications of this complex new tax. However, after passing that report on a split vote, the chair of Senate Transportation brought forward a compromise. The substitute amendment will implement the MBUF, I think was clearly established and defined by previous presenters, for hybrid vehicles, in addition to the battery electrics. Including hybrids that you don't plug in, that will enact this beginning January 1, 2029. To be clear, though, this fee is based on miles driven during that year, so the actual first payments would not occur by our constituents until 2030, as so eloquently explained by the senator from Washington. So enacting the expansion to hybrid vehicles into statute now, with this substitute amendment, now restoring that, it will allow the Agency of Transportation to leverage existing federal grant funds rather than state dollars to develop the IT infrastructure and administrative systems necessary to expand the fee beyond just battery electric vehicles. In addition, this substitute amendment will focus the initial rollout on the fee on those vehicles that are currently contributing to the least amount to the maintenance of the state's transportation system on a per mile basis, addressing a lot of what was just presented. So in the substitute, instead of deleting these sections, the substitute amendment actually modifies them as following. Section 21, we update the definitions of covered vehicle to include plug-in hybrids and standard hybrids, effective January 1, 2029. In section 22, we also did something per the advice and recommendation of Senate Transportation that I'm going to attempt to explain, that the handout that you didn't receive also does a really good job of explaining, but we kind of mucked it up a little bit. So I'm glad you didn't hand it out, because that would sort of, I'm glad the senator from Washington did not hand it out, because I'd have to correct where the handout is now different from this. Okay, so in section 22 in the substitute amendment that you'll now see before you creates a fuel tax credit for hybrid owners to ensure they aren't double taxed. It reduces the MBUF, the amount that they would owe, based on the estimated gas tax that the driver already paid at the pump based on the fuel efficiency of that vehicle. And with a pretty simple calculation, it also eliminates the previous $178 cap in favor of this new calculation. And to illustrate it, I don't have such a really nice little handout. Had I had more time, I would have definitely wanted to update this. But instead, I'm just going to give you a little minivan example from personal experience to tell you how this will translate when we pass this into law, what this will look like for our constituents with hybrids in 2030, 2029, and 2030. We own, the Chittendens, own a Sienna hybrid minivan. I call it my swagger wagon. All right, so it gets about, that's meant to be another one of those attempts at small humor, dad jokes on the floor, try to lighten it up here. All right, so suppose it's 2030 and I'm paying the MBUF on my own minivan, which gets about 35 miles per gallon. So I don't plug this in, it's just a hybrid vehicle. If my family drives about 22,000 miles a year, we do like road trips, so we put on a good amount of miles on the minivan. It's the preferred vehicle. My fee would be the base MBUF rate of previously presented a penny, 1.4 cents per mile, minus the credit for the gas tax I already paid to this calculation. So my base MBUF would be that 22,000 miles times the 1.4 cents, which would be about $308. But I won't pay that $308. Instead, I would take what I likely paid at the pump based on the miles per gallon of the vehicle and the miles from the odometer readings, 22,000 miles, divided by that 35 to produce how many gallons of gas I probably purchased, approximately. Okay, and that's about 631 gallons of tax. and multiply it by a value that will be determined and fluctuated in future calculations of, in this case, for these purposes, about 31 cents, 31.51 cents in gas tax is what you're currently paying. When you buy a gallon of gas, I guess in Vermont, you're paying about 31 cents, 31.5 cents. So that would actually be a fuel tax credit of about $198.07. So the actual amount that I'd have to owe when I register, when I do a periodic inspection for my Schwager wagon, I'm going to try that again, but still didn't really land that well, would be about $109.93 for that minivan. So for 22,000 miles of driving, I would owe an additional $110. And if I failed to report this mileage or obtain an inspection, my default rate, according to this substitute amendment, would be $375. But your Senate Transportation Committee really factored in a lot of considerations as to how if they were to have paid that amount, they could still get that credited back the next time they registered. So those are all the details that are going to be worked out through this $3 million federal study. So that was the crux of what was changed since the Senate Finance Committee amendment. The last things we did do, which was spoken to in the report, sections 44 and 45, we were jealous of all the butchering that was being done over an appropriation, so we did take a meat axe to this bill. My apologies. So we did cut sections 44 and 45. Our understanding is that these jet fuel taxes were raised somewhat late in the process, and the committee sent the bill out, and then there was more testimony and more people wanted to be heard about it. So in both the original report and the substitute deletes that 2% surcharge of sale of jet fuel. Following testimony, based on testimony from industry experts, we heard that raising this tax on jet fuel would lead to a practice, we heard that this would be raising, would make Vermont, sorry, I missed a sentence there, it would make Vermont one of the most expensive states in the country for jet fuel. And that has, through industry testimony, led to practices in airline industry called tankering. So think of like tinkering, but tankering, where airlines would fill their planes with extra fuel elsewhere to avoid buying it in BTV, which would often reduce the number of longer distance flights from that airport, leading to a lot more needed connections and shorter hops. So since I believe many of us want to encourage longer range flights and fewer short hops out of Burlington, your committee did not feel this surcharge was prudent policy for our state's airport at this time. Lastly, we have aligned the effective dates for with the MBUF expansion changes. Your Committee on Finance heard from Jeff Bartley from the Patrick Leahy International Airport, Damian Leonard, Logan Muberry. I guess I'm not supposed to read the names. All right, I'm trying to do this right, Mr. President. So we also heard from Joint Fiscal, Agency of Transportation, and the Chair of Senate Transportation. Your Senate Finance Committee took a straw poll vote of 5.5 to 0 to 1 on this substitute, but we rounded it up to an even 6-0-1. And with that, Mr. President, we'd ask the Senate to concur.
I didn't want to interrupt your flow, Senator. Senator from Washington.
So I did ask the pages to hand this out. I thought those senators that bleed green and gold would want to see something produced by the University of Vermont Transportation Center. There might be, like the senator from Chittenden South said, there might be some things in here that are a little different than the bill, but it's still a great handout from the University of Vermont Transportation Center on how that mileage-based user fee will work. But if you want to hear what the differences are, you can talk to the senator from Chittenden South. Thank you.
Senator from Orleans.
May I inquire of the report of the amendment?
Okay. Before we go on any further, we need to hear the appropriations report from the senator from Lamoille.
So the appropriations report, the Appropriations Committee has an amendment which in this, where we strike sections 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 in the first instance. Those are all the pieces that deal with the local option tax that has been moved to the big bill. And the second amendment that we offer deals with the vehicle miles, deals, excuse me, with the medical transports and those pieces. The Appropriations Committee finally, with the money that came over there, we put 300,000 into the medical transports. So the Appropriations Committee would offer that amendment, and we offered those amendments and the bill with a 7-0 vote out of Appropriations.
Senator from Orleans.
Mr. President, can I inquire the reporter from Finance?
The reporter is interrogated.
Mr. President, are you speaking about the appropriations amendment right now or the finance amendment?
Yeah, we are planning to take the finance amendment first, so the question is appropriate.
Mr. President, can the senator, apologize, explain to me just how the money flow works with the charges and the credits? Are the dollars going to the inspection station and then those dollars flow back to the Agency of Transportation? Does it go directly to DMV? How does this work?
Mr. President, that is an excellent question. I think it's what actually inspired the original Senate Finance Committee report. And I'm probably in a minute here going to hopefully phone a friend from Senate Transportation that might want to elaborate. But my general impression, Mr. President, is we don't know. And so that's what this $3 million federal grant is going to start fleshing out, is what these processes and procedures and what this would look like, how this would translate into implementation, because it is no small task to decide how much is going to be owed, how it's going to be collected. So to answer your question, Mr. President, we are voting on the trust and faith that this is going to be 3 to 4 years out with a comprehensive $3 million study to answer those questions. That's my impression, but if a committee member from Senate Transportation, I'd love to yield to the senator from Washington to elaborate, if I may, Mr. President.
The senator from Washington can stand up after the questioning is done, if he would so choose.
Sure. First of all, I have great faith, Mr. President, in the federal government and the state of Vermont coming up and providing solutions to this. If the senator from Washington would like to explain it further, I would enjoy that explanation.
Are you done with your questioning of the senator from Chittenden?
I am. Thank you, Mr. President.
The senator from Washington is interrogated if he so chooses.
Thank you. I'm going to answer the prior question because I got a phone call from a friend. And the answer is that we do know that the money will be paid on your registration. So just as you pay your registration fee now, this will be part of your registration fee. So when we go to DMV, nothing will change when you get your vehicle inspected. You'll pay the inspection fee, they'll inspect your vehicle. They'll just send that odometer reading to DMV, and DMV will use that for establishing what the fee would be. So the registration is where you'll pay the mileage basis fee.
And Mr. President, the credit will show up on that as well. So it's going to be kind of a different document because typically you can pay for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, I can't remember, and you just pay a single fee. But now they have to change the form, I take it, in order to express these new charges and credits. Am I right in that?
You're correct, Mr. President, and that's part of the study and plan that the DMV and AOT will be doing, is like exactly how that form looks, how do they do it, within the My DMV page, so you'll have an account. If you can't, there'll be a way to do it on paper if you don't have access to the website and setting up a digital account, but your digital account will show what you paid your registration, and when you have your second odometer reading, it'll say what you owe. If you happen to have paid more than you owe, then it'll show your credit that you could use on next year's registration. If you owe money, it'll say what you owe, and then you have 90 days to make that payment.
And what would happen, Mr. President, if you didn't make that payment?
You will get visited by the Commissioner of DMV. They will send out a bill and reminders, and they will, just as you do now, if you don't pay DMV fees, you won't get your car registered, because this is part of your registration fee, the DMV. So if you don't pay the mileage-based fee, they will not re-register your vehicle or register your vehicle.
Interesting. I'd like to thank the Senator, Mr. President. And I understand that the Senate Transportation Committee, the predicament that they're in, and obviously we need to have good roads, and it also doesn't only just impact the state highways. It really impacts the municipalities. And so I look forward to hearing how the solutions that they come up with. Thank you, Mr. President.
Are you ready for the question? The question is, shall the recommendation of proposal of amendment of the Committee on Transportation be amended as recommended by the Committee on Finance as substituted? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. No. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. And you have amended the recommendation of proposal of amendment of the Committee on Transportation as recommended by the Committee on Finance. The question now is, shall the recommendation of proposal of amendment of the Committee on Transportation be amended as recommended by the Committee on Appropriations? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you've amended the proposal of amendment of the Committee on Transportation. The question is now, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Transportation as amended? Senator from Essex.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to just thank the Transportation Committee for their hard work. They've just been dealt, in my opinion, a very raw deal right from the start. It's not like we haven't learned about where the transportation fund was or where the department was or anything. It started loud and clear last year by the chair telling of all the problems that we were facing if we didn't do anything. We've done nothing but raid this fund. We've done nothing but mismanage this fund. And I really think that transportation isn't to blame. I think they've done a great job. They've cut where they've had to cut. They've done what they've had to do. They've done everything along the way. We had plenty of warning to do with what was right. We had it from the governor's office all the way straight through the House, the Senate. We've had all the right reasons to do everything, and now we're struggling and we're scrambling, and we're trying to come up with all these solutions. As if all with what we did was just to fund transportation like it should have been funded right from the start, not start out at a $30 or $40 million hole, or not come up with better solutions right straight from the start. Back when, even looking at the graphs that were presented from the Senator of Washington, looking at all the problems, the serious problems that we're facing, you could see the downward trend. Even back from the times that when I was on transportation, was we could see the trend was started. We're late to the game. I can't support this bill, and I feel bad about that, because I do think that transportation really has worked really hard. I think that we just need to go back to the basics. When you are arguably $1.6 billion or $2 billion over where you ought to be on your budget when you adjust for inflation from COVID times to now, you ought to be able to do a lot of things right. When you're not funding transportation so that you're not paving the roads that need to happen, you're not fixing the bridges, but even worse than that, you're not capturing the free money from the federal government, you're doing things wrong. You're doing things terribly wrong. I just think that a lot of this stuff is trying to solve problems that could be solved right from the beginning if you did it right. We have time to do that. A lot of these programs aren't starting until 28, 29, 30. Let's just go back to the beginning. Let's do what we're supposed to do. Let's fund transportation. We have dollars within our budgets to do that. Let's make hard choices on other parts of the budget that really were created back in the COVID times when we were spending COVID dollars, and we are creating programs and positions with the promises that once those dollars were gone, those monies and positions would go away. Let's get our financial house in order. There's other parts of the budget that we can do that with. I'm sorry for transportation. I'm sorry for the whole mess that you guys are in. Thank you for the incredible job that you're doing. You're being dealt the wrong hand, and I'll shut up. Thank you.
Senator from Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not sure I understand how we're billing spending that we shouldn't have spent. I don't understand that comment, but I'm going to ask, if I may, of the reporter of a senator from Washington, please.
Senator from Washington as the reporter of the bill is interrogated.
So I'm unclear, Senator, if we're not ready to tax all vehicles with the MVU, why are we ready to tax just the EVs?
The bill coming out of transportation did have a plan to tax all, to apply the mileage-based user fee to all vehicles by 2031. The amendments that we just approved take that away, so it'll be after we get the report from the AOT and DMV on how that might happen, and then future legislature can decide to, after we've had some time with the AMBA, with the hybrids and the EVs, then future legislature will decide whether they want to extend it to other vehicles or not. So,
Right. So my understanding is we would be as ready, when we're ready to tax that fee on EVs and hybrids, we would probably also be ready to charge it on all vehicles. Is that my understanding?
yeah, I think that's correct. Mainly, you would want to have some time with the hybrids that also have a gas tax. That's going to be the tricky thing, is when you're paying both a mileage-based user fee and a gas tax, how you prebate or rebate that so you're not being double taxed. So sometime with the hybrids, which there's fewer of those than gas cars, obviously. So that was the idea in our original bill, that we would do some of those, like plug-in hybrids or hybrids in 29, and then in 31, we would have all gas vehicles under 10,000 pounds.
Okay, we still have $10 million to raise here, so I'm unclear why we're not doing more of this sooner. But anyway, thank you, Senator. I appreciate. I'm a big fan of mileage-based user fee and wish we were getting there much faster. And I'd like to ask my next question of the senator from Grand Isle.
Senator from Grand Isle is interrogated as a reporter of the bill.
So thank you, Senator. You seem to have taken on bridges. Bridges are not on our chart that the chair of transportation handed out, which is puzzling because bridges are so critically important. I'm missing bridges on this page. And I guess my question for you is, given bridges aren't on this page, what percent of our bridges are poor or very poor at the moment? And are bridges prioritized for fixing?
The latter part of your question, bridges are prioritized. As far as exact statistics on poor and very poor, I'd have to get back to you on third reading.
Thanks. I'd appreciate that because it's missing from this chart. Thank you.
You're correct.
Senator from Lamoille.
So a couple of, let me take a stab at a couple of, first, bridges. We were in crisis with bridges about 15 years ago. Around 2008, 9, 10, and during that period of time, we created the TIB Bond Fund, and the TIB Bond Fund is a single bond fund that you heard about earlier that we will look at to get recommendations about what bonding might look like versus pay-as-you-go budget might look about next year. But during that period of time, we did a lot of bridges after Irene and during, in the last Great Recession, we received a whole bunch of infrastructure money where we caught up on a lot of bridges. Most bridges have an 80-year lifespan, and they have a very long lifespan. So we did a lot of catching up during that period of time. So our bridges are one of the areas where we are not below our goals, but we will get you information about that. But a piece of that is because we did so much during those two bulges during the last Great Recession when there was a lot of federal money around food beds, and we had Irene that we came and we were able to make match money. And so we dealt with that. The piece about the amendment from finance, and the compromise that transportation came up with finance around that. Part of the reason that we need to take steps now, if we're going to develop a system, and all of these systems take time. You can't develop a credit system with an IT system built for a credit system that says you're going to get credit for your gas tax paid, and we're all going to pay the same amount per miles traveled. We're trying to get about $14 for every 1,000 miles traveled out of all cars because we believe equity is important between all drivers and all vehicles. And if you're going to treat everyone fair across the board, that's our goal. If you're going to develop a system at DMV that gives people credit for the gas that they pay and tries to get to that level of the same amount for everyone, it's going to take IT systems and it's going to take work at DMV. We are at the point with electric vehicles in January where we're going to put that in place. This has been a 3-year process to get here. Every step you take in this is a 3 to 5 year step. They don't build systems by snapping fingers. They do it over time, and this takes a lot of work. Part of the important part about this for us now is we would be paying for all of this on our own dime and with state dollars that we don't have in this budget. What we got is a federal grant that until 2028 allows us to do electric vehicles and expand. And if I might, I'm going to read from that grant. As Vermont begins to develop an incremental mileage-based user fee focused on electric vehicles, it will also consider how to grow and expand the program to address different use causes and the possible inclusion of different vehicles of different classes dependent on weight and energy fuel type. Vermont will not have all of the transition questions answered initially. However, the state can begin at this small scale and with the larger end goal in mind to develop a fairer, cost-effective, and sustainable revenue solution for a safer, cleaner, and more resilient transportation system in the years to come. The transition to a larger mileage-based user fee program is complex and involves numerous technical and policy questions. As a result, a comprehensive plan to grow the program must be established. This will take time. This will take steps. Part of the issue for the Transportation Committee is if we're going to make those steps and we're having declining revenues from combustion engines based because people are traveling more miles, you have to start now. If you don't start now, you put it so far out in the future that we have a short-term problem and we have a long-term problem. And we're taking steps now to address the long-term problem because it will take time to design these systems.
Are you ready for the question? Senator from Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I want to say I greatly appreciate and respect the Transportation Committee for all their hard work on this. I too will be voting no today. I do expect the bill to pass, and I just want to state why. So I just want to remind us that we have a transportation fund to align our taxation with the benefits principle, where we collect transportation revenues to fund transportation services and infrastructure. The purchase and use transfer that we've been doing for the last few years, about $50 million, is coming out of the transportation fund and going into the ed fund. I believe that what the governor proposed and what the Transportation Committee in both the House as well as the Senate proposed, we I did make a case for this on the other bill, miscellaneous tax, is the better path forward. We should claw back the purchase and use tax to the transportation fund to purify the uses of those dollars collected from transportation activities to fund transportation services. And that would reduce the need for new complex administratively burdensome fees falling only on Vermonters and their Vermont registered vehicles. So I'll be voting no, but I appreciate and respect all the hard work of the Senate Transportation Committee. Thank you, Mr. President.
Are you ready for the question? Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to point out that even though I voted for the original bill that did have the construct of the purchase and use fees being restored to the transportation fund that the senator from Chittenden South just mentioned, if we do it the other way, we're taking it from the education fund. And that's basically raising our property taxes, putting more pressure on the education fund at a time when we're trying to figure that whole transformation out. If we have that transfer coming out of the education fund, that just puts more pressure when they do the December 1st letter, and we'll lower the amount of money in the education fund, which basically puts money on the property tax, which I think is even more broadly impacted. So that is why I support doing it the way that we ended up with the amendments and not doing it the way the governor is proposing. So, thank you.
Are you ready for the question? The question is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Transportation as amended? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you've proposed to the House to amend the bill as proposed by the Committee on Transportation as amended. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Windsor.
I wanted to say that when you vote on this bill, if you have disagreements with the MBUF or other components, you also have to remember that a no vote is a no vote against every project in the White Book. Those are projects that support town highway aid funding. That's what you're voting no on. You're voting no on the project that supports your local stop sign being put in. You're voting no for supports for bike and pedestrian safety. You're voting no on water quality improvements and flood resiliency. And if you, as an individual, feel comfortable with voting no for the substantial effort of the Agency of Transportation in their asset management programming, I think that that is a difficult position to explain to your constituents who rely so heavily on that funding.
Are you ready for the question? Senator from Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will be brief. I wanted to offer my thanks to the committee in an unusual way. We're not usually confronting existential problems, and I think the chair of the Transportation Committee has been accurate and eloquent about that problem for the last couple of years. If you drove here today, as I believe almost all of us did, you saw the roads in their current spring-like condition, and I think that is a harbinger of bad things to come if we don't make some very dramatic moves. I applaud the committee for working hand in glove with the money committees to establish majority agreement around how we'll move forward toward an MBUF, as well as how that will impact the education fund and other funds. So with that said, Mr. President, I think of this Transportation Committee as extraordinarily knowledgeable. We have on that committee chairs from the other body, as well as our current chair, and I trust their work, and I'm glad to see this being undertaken. Thank you.
The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you've ordered third reading of H 944. Senator from Chittenden.
With that said, Mr. President, we have just a few minutes to make it to the cafeteria before they stop serving for the day. So I will just warn senators before I make an adjournment motion that next week we will be running longer hours You'll notice that next week, the schedule has us in at 10 a.m. every morning. The intention will be to run, rather than 2 hours or 2.5 as we've been doing this week, to up that to 3.5 to 4 hours so that we clear the calendar as quickly as possible. So starting next week, I'll ask you to be thinking about how you will get nutrition during that. We may take a brief lunch interval if the calendar allows, but if we don't, it would be good to have something, big breakfast, early dinner. With that said, Mr. President, I would move that pending announcements, the Senate stand in adjournment until
10 a.m.
10 a.m. Tuesday, May 12th, 2026.
Are there any announcements? Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Finance is starting at 1:30, so I suggest that you get in your time machine, get your pizza and ice cream, and be there as soon as you can.
Are there any further announcements? Senator from Rutland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate government operations will meet at 2:15.
Senator from Bennington.
Mr. President, the Education Committee will meet at 2:15.
Senator from Wyndham.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Institutions Committee should go straight to the room. We did have a witness at 1. I don't know if they'll still be there.
Are there any further announcements? Senator from Windsor.
Very briefly, yesterday I was not able to announce the fact that the State House Singers were singing at 1. We sang, and I think it was beautiful. With my retirement, we have now no senators singing in the State House Singers, and I know there are singers in this body who love to sing. It's one of the only opportunities we have to have all departments, everyone who works under the Golden Dome participates in some way in singing. And I'd really call out and ask a Senate singer to come and join next year the Senate State House Singers. It's really a privilege and a pleasure to sing in the House chamber. Thank you.
Are there any further announcements? Senator from Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yesterday, senators may have noted that there was a group of folks here to celebrate the senior senator from Windsor and watch her in action. I had intended to offer a small gesture to one of her actions that has become a tradition, the action of poetry. But when I looked up, she was apparently in action elsewhere because she was not on the floor. And so I will offer you that gesture today. Senator Clarkson, she stands bold and just. In truth and in justice she trusts. With a twinkle in her eye, she will fight till the sky, a champion so fierce and robust. Thank you.
Senator from Chittenden.
Mr. President, I have been asked by a friend who I respect greatly to announce an event this coming Wednesday that is to support our currently deployed military families. So this coming Wednesday, it's an effort by the Vermont Family Readiness Program, supported by the Vermont Chamber of Congress in coordination with the Vermont Legislative National Guard and Veterans Affairs Caucus. There is a diapers drive. So this coming Wednesday, this weekend, while you're at Costco, or you're at the gas station, where you're at, grab some diapers, grab some wipes, or you can also give cash. And just to sweeten the pot, Mr. President, I was going to go a lot longer into this whole spiel about diapers, but since I know it's late and you're all hungry, I just want to say the following. If the Senate raises more diapers and wipes than that other chamber, I personally will buy everybody pizza next Thursday, right, through the long session. So you guys come up with diapers and wipes next Wednesday. I'm going to keep a Senate tally. I'm buying the pizza for everybody in the Senate. Thank you, Mr. President.
Are there any further announcements? Seeing none, the senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate stand in adjournment until 10 a.m. Tuesday, May 12th, 2026. Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we'll stand in adjournment till 10 a.m. Tuesday, May 12th,